if you have to reconcile a nation after an all-out bloody civil war, and this country did have to reconcile, it had to find some balance. Think about it for a moment. Let's pick your moment in time. Pick 1865, pick 1875, pick 1900, pick 1915. Americans had to find some kind of balance, if they could, between two profound challenges that were not easily reconciled. One of those challenges was healing. Healing, and all that that might mean. Physical healing, rebuilding, healing the psychic wounds of war, especially in the South, where one of every 5 able-bodied males from age 18 to 45 was dead or incapacitated. One of every 5, 20%. Healing is one challenge. National healing, legal healing, political healing, personal healing, psychic healing. The other challenge was justice. But justice for whom? Justice by whom? I'm not apologizing for anybody here. But justice how defined? Justice for the freed people just freed from slavery, or justice for white Southerners who had faced Sherman's March to the Sea. They had a very different definition of justice. Justice enacted by whom? How? Under what system? Under what philosophy? Under what kind of legal regime? Under what kind of political science? How could you reconcile and balance healing and justice? What this country discovered, what we still don't like, is the only way, the only place we've ever been able to process that problem of healing and justice is in the politics of memory. And that's always a matter of who controls that memory, who writes that memory. Now, I mean, if you want, we can get into the causes and consequences of the Jim Crow system and how it is built upon a certain version of Civil War memory. We could get into why it lasted for so many generations. We could get into why and how it took the Civil Rights Revolution of the 50s and 1960s to finally kill segregation, to put Jim Crow away as a legal system, why that took so long, and how this strategy or that strategy worked better under this circumstances or not, under this circumstance or not. But think of it another way. I thought of this last week. And you know, historians are terrible at predicting. This is not what we do. We always get asked, we always try, we always think we should. We're really lousy at it. But you know, until last week, the question of gay rights and gay marriage had never succeeded on a ballot. It had only succeeded in courts. Where it had succeeded in courts, never on a ballot. I was myself saying, it's not going to happen. Not for years. It won't succeed on a ballot. What happened? Boom! 3 states voted it in. Sometimes history does turn in ways we don't expect. Now, but if you took the issue, let's say, of black equality, and you put it on a ballot in this country, if you put black suffrage on a ballot during Reconstruction years, it had no chance. It got in because it got in first under the 14th Amendment as a means of forcing the southern states back, well, not forcing, bringing the ex-Confederate states back into the Union, and a condition of their readmission to the Union was the right to vote for black males. It then got into the Constitution under the 15th Amendment, which said you could not be prohibited from voting because of race or previous condition of servitude or national origin and so forth, although that was still only for men. But if you'd have put black suffrage on the ballot, it had no chance. None. So you have to look at, how change comes in history. We want it to just come because sometimes something's just right and it ought to happen. You know, it just ought to be. My favorite quote actually from Martin Luther King is not from the Dream Speech or any of those other probably more famous ones, especially not that one about, Obama's so fond of that King quote about, how's it go? The arc of history always bends towards justice. I don't think that's original with King, by the way, but it doesn't matter. Obama's very fond of that quote, and I don't blame him, and it's a beautiful line. Presidents ought to say things like that. No, they should. I mean, we expect that. Do you really believe it? In the lives you've lived, do you really believe that? Or do you want to believe it? Does history always bend toward justice? Ask the German Jews that. Ask the Russians that. Ask Cambodians that. It really depends on where you ask that question. To whom, at what time in history? My favorite King line is the one where he said, human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Even a superficial look at this is Martin Luther King now, a man whose voice we always look to for hope. But listen to him. Even a superficial look at history reveals that no social advance rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. That's a different way of thinking about that arc, isn't it? I mean, what King is saying there is, great change? Inevitable? So, why did we have to wait 100, 150 years? And why are we still waiting? Who knows how far the Tea Party is going to go with their secession nonsense? And by the way, they don't have a right of secession. I hope we actually have a debate about this. I hope they get up over 5 million petition signers on that White House website, so that we might actually have a debate. Americans might actually learn something about secession. There is no right of secession. There is a right of revolution. You have a right of revolution under God. You have a right of revolution under natural law. You have no right of secession. That was outlawed by Texas v. White after the American Civil War. The Supreme Court's already spoken on that over and over and over. And yet, people, whenever they need it, as Governor Perry of Texas did back when the Affordable Care Act passed, he thought, gee, maybe Texas ought to consider secession. He later said, I was just joking. Really, sir? Maybe the governor of Texas needs to read a little history, too. You see, history's never over. That's why we had to wait that long. It's never over. It has no end. It's not going any particular place.